Now, in this tutorial series, what I want to do is, first of all, I'm going to assume that you guys have never created an Android app before, but you guys do have some programming experience. So what I want to do is I want to show you guys how to develop Android apps for both the phone and the tablet from the ground up. So that's what we're going to be doing, creating some awesome apps, someone that is totally new to Android app development. However, before I begin, I want to mention this. For those of you who have been following my YouTube channel for a long time, you probably already noticed that I have another Android app development tutorial series, and the reason that I decided to make a brand new one is because that tutorial series we actually made it a couple years ago, and since then a lot of the software and tools that you use to develop these apps have been updated. Actually, we have a brand new piece of software called Android Studio, and I'll show you guys how to install that and use it and everything. But the software itself is a lot different than what we used to teach Android development in the past. So again, this tutorial series is pretty much just going to be updated, new, kind of more relevant. So that's why I decided to do that. So anyways, I'm going to be quiet now and let's go ahead and get started. So the very first thing we need is of course the Java JDK. Now I'm guessing that if you guys are watching this, then you already are familiar with Java, at least a little bit, and you probably already have the Java JDK installed on your computer. However, just to make sure that I cover everything 100%, if you don't have the Java JDK already installed on your computer, this is how you get it. And of course, I probably should mention this. Why do we need a Java JDK if we're making Android apps? Well, all Android apps, as well as a lot of the software itself, is made using Java. That's what language we're going to write in primarily to make these Android apps. So, of course, the Java JDK, which stands for the Java Development Kit, is the core foundation that we need before we can even think about making any Android apps. So, the website always changes, but if you go to Google and type in download Java JDK, then the first thing that's always going to pop up is the link to download this Java Development Kit. Now, if you click right here, what we want is this Java Platform JDK right there. However, whenever we click here, we see that we have a lot of Java development kits that are available for download. Alright, so we know that we don't want Linux because I'm not on Linux. We know that we don't want Mac, so we have a couple options here, Windows x86 and Windows 64. Now, the difference between these two is 64 is for the Windows 64-bit version, and the 86 is for the 32-bit version of Windows. So if you don't know what version of Windows you have, go to the Start menu, and where you see Computer right here, right-click it, and then you're going to see a thing called Properties. Whenever you select that, if you look at your system type, it says, okay, 64-bit operating system. So that means I have Windows 64-bit. So whenever I download this, I'm going to choose 64. If yours says 32, then click this one right here. But, of course, you need to accept the agreement first, and then download it. And what it's going to do is it's going to download an executable file, and it's going to take a while, so I'll pause my video. I won't make you watch the whole thing. And we are back. It took about a minute, but now I just download the entire executable. And of course, if you're on Chrome, which you probably should be, highly recommend it, then go to your downloads and you can just click that. However, if you accidentally close out of that, then of course your downloaded files, if you go to your, well, I'll just show you guys. Alright, you can either go to your computer from Windows Explorer and click downloads. That's probably the easiest way, so just do that. So anyways, whatever file you just downloaded, double click it, and then of course, I actually don't know if you could see that. I don't know if my screen recorder showed my system little pop-ups there, but it says, do you want to allow this to, access your computer? Yes. Let me close out all this. Alright, so this is really self-explanatory. If you ever downloaded anything before, then it's going to be simple. Just click next, next, and it's going to do all the hard work for you. However, there's one thing, once this is completely done, that you guys need to follow along with. So again, if you think about skipping this entire tutorial, don't do that because you're going to miss an important step at the end. So wait for this entire thing to la 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 whatever. Alright, and what you want to do is you want to make sure to leave everything in its default location, because as long as you do that and as long as you follow along, then whenever you download, install Android Studio, it's not gonna be confused looking at some weird location for anything. So make sure that you keep all the default settings whenever you're running this installer. Alright, so now we have the JDK installed on our computer. However, before we download Android Studio, what we need to do is we need to tell our computer exactly where it is. And that's because later on when we when we download Android Studio, it's going to look for that JDK. So what we need to do is we need to explicitly say, hey computer, this is where the JDK is. So go to your start menu and then click on computer, and then make sure you're starting at your hard drive. So in order to get the path to this, as long as you kept everything at default during installation, it's going to be in your program files. And then if you go down to Java, double click that, and what folder you want to click on is actually the JDK. This is the Java runtime environment, the JRE. Don't worry about that. Double click the JDK, and this is actually the path you want. So what you can do now is you can actually right click any of these files, but because it's going to give you the same path, what I'm about to show you guys, but just for consistency, right click this bin and click properties. So again, this is the location that you're looking for right here, the location that your Java development kit is at. So copy that, right click and copy, and now once you have that location, close out of everything, because we have to tell our computer, alright, this is where our JDK is. So how do we do that? It's actually pretty simple. If you open your start menu again and right click computer and go to properties, you're going to see a link on the left hand side that says advanced system settings. If you click that, you're going to see this little pop-up right here. Click on the button that says environment variables. So I already have this set up because actually for this tutorial I uninstalled my Java JDK and then I reinstalled it, so just to show you guys how to do it. But you're probably aren't going to have a variable set up right here. So in order to get that, click new under user variables, and you need to name the variable Java underscore home. Make sure that everything is in capital letters, and then for the variable value, paste in that location of your JDK and hit OK. So what we're essentially doing is we're telling our computer, alright, whenever you need to work with the Java JDK, or the JDK is kind of redundant what I'm saying, but whenever Android Studio is looking for it, then it's going to look in your environment variables and it's going to say, okay, that's where all the crap I need is. So it's not literally going to say crap, but now that we have everything compatible and our computer is able to find and work with the Java JDK, it's probably getting annoying that I keep saying that, but whatever. We are now set up and ready to move on to the next step. So thank you guys for watching, and I also want to mention this before I let you guys go. If you guys have any questions during this entire tutorial series about anything small, including a little bit of code, or anything big like maybe you have an error while you try to install something, then go to my forum, and under this section right here, Java and Android development, if you click that, you can create a new post, and then you can ask it right there, and a lot of people are always here willing to help. You can also browse some of the common topics, and there's a lot of good information in here as well. So chances are, if you have a problem, someone already asked it and they already figured it out. But if you can't find your answer, then go ahead and create a new post. Again, I am always on this website, and a bunch of other people loving to help you out. So for now, thank you guys for watching. In the next video, we'll go ahead and download and install Android Studio. Alright guys, so the next thing we have to do is download Android Studio. Now, the website is most likely going to change because they always do. However, if you just type in download Android Studio, it's always going to be the first thing that pops up. So click this, And of course, this is the program that allows you to write Android applications. Now, the cool thing about this is that unlike the old program that you used to use, this was made just for writing Android apps and it has everything you need built in. So this is the program where we actually write the code, and this is the program where all these little emulators, which are pretty much like virtual phones that you can test on, those are built into the entire like layout designer, and I'll teach you guys how to use that later on. But it's basically a graphical way to lay out your Android apps that's built in as well. It's incredibly awesome, incredibly cool. So let's go ahead and get started. So of course, click that, agree to whatever. Let me read this real quick. Oh, pretty cool. All right, download this. And it's actually probably going to take a little bit to download because it's almost a gigabyte. It might be a gigabyte by the time you download it. But anyways, I'll come back to you guys when this is done. Alright, so it took a while, but I finally have it download this executable file right here. And I want to mention this real quick before I move on. If anyone was lazy and decided to skip my last tutorial, what we did is we set up the JDK to be compatible with Android Studio. So if you did do that and skip everything, then follow this direction right here. But for those of you guys who stuck with me, then you guys are good to go because we already did that step. So anyways, actually I'm going to close out of that. We don't need this browser anymore. However, if we go to our downloaded files, then we see that we now have this Android Studio bundle. So this, of course, is the installer. So double click that. Alright, so anything that pops up, just say yes. We trust them, we trust Google. Next, and leave. Pretty much you're going to leave all of these as the defaults. Agree, agree. Do I want to install in the default location? Yes. Recommended, looks good. That looks good as well. Alright, so it says it is complete. Installation complete. Setup was completed successfully. Sweet. Go ahead and click next. And I actually don't want to start this up right yet because what I want to do is I'm going to go to my start menu right here and I'm going to go to all programs. And now we can see after we have everything downloaded and installed, we're going to have a folder called Android Studio. So if I click that, I'm going to see this Android Studio program. I'm going to right click it and send it to desktop. So that way I have a Android Studio icon on my desktop because we're going to be using it a lot now. So the first time I open this, I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose Run as Administrator. Now the very first time you open it, this thing is going to pop up right here and it's going to download all the extra components that it needs, but don't worry, this is only a one-time thing the very first time to set everything up. Alright, so all those additional components look like everything is good to go. So click Finish. Alright, so this is the welcome screen to Android Studio. From here, what we can do is we can actually start a brand new project. However, before we get started, there is one last thing that we need to do. And this isn't absolutely necessary, but it's going to save you guys a ton of headaches in the future. If you go down to Configure right here, you're going to see something called SDK Manager. And if this is grayed out or you can't select it for some reason, make sure that you close out of this and right click and Run as Administrator, and then it's going to be available. So anyways, click this right here, and what's going to happen is you're going to have a new pop-up window that appears. Now this basically allows you to download additional packages or additional code that you're going to use whenever you're developing apps. As you can see, it says install 9 packages, and the ones that are checked are actually the ones that we're going to want to install. So if you click this button right here, and of course we need to accept the license and install, then what it's going to do is it's going to install these additional packages. Alright guys, so once you have all the optional packages installed, what you can do is just close out of Android SDK Manager, and it's also a better idea to close the Android Studio altogether, and now right click it and run it as administrator to open it again. And the reason that you want to do this is because whenever you open it this time, you want to make sure that Android Studio is aware of all the updated packages. So that's why we closed out and opened it again, so it doesn't have anything weird stored in its cache or memory or anything. So now we are finally done installing everything and setting everything up. We are ready to start making our first Android project. Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial, what I want to do is I just want to make sure that everyone's Android Studio is set up and working correctly. And the best way to do this is actually build a really simple basic Android Studio project and run it. And if we get any errors, if we come across any issues, I'll show you guys how to fix them as well. So the first thing that you always do whenever you create a new project is just click Start a New Android Studio Project. You guys probably could have figured that out. Now I'll talk you guys through this real quick, but again, this is just an example to make sure that everything is working correctly. So if I am kind of running over everything kind of quick, or if you don't fully understand everything that I'm doing, don't worry, we're going to be coming back to everything, cover it in detail later on. But again, let me explain just real quick what's going on. Now this, of course, the application name is not only the project name, so it's not only, whenever you're browsing your computer, you can identify which project you're working on, but this application name is actually the name of the app whenever you put it in the Google Play Store. So again, for this one, we can just keep the default name because this is, like I said, a really stupid example. Just to make sure everything's working. We're not actually going to be selling this. However, when you do develop an app that you are eventually going to sell, take some time and think of a good application name because it does matter. Now, the company domain, again, yours is probably going to be like, I don't know what it was to start with, probably like example.org or example.com or something. But the company domain is how you identify each application. Now, as you can see, whenever you type in a domain name, okay, come on cursor, the new boston.com, .cinnamon, alright, .com, you see that the package name fills in automatically, and this is called a reverse domain notation. So whenever you're going to a website, you would type the name followed by .com. The package name is com.thenewboston. The application name. So again, this is just an identifier to say, okay, there's a lot of apps named My Application on the Google Play Store. How do we know which one is Bucky's? Well, that's the one with the New Boston. So again, this is just the name of your app, your website, and then once you fill in both those things, it fills in the rest of the crap for you. So, got like phlegm in my throat. So click next, and this is actually an easy screen to understand. It says, okay, you're developing an app for the phone and tablet. This is all we're going to be doing for this tutorial series. I'm not going to show you guys how to develop anything for the TV or wear. Now, wear is pretty much anything that you can wear on your body. Like, I don't know if they have like glasses yet, but this is like smartwatches and stuff like that. So again, this tutorial series is just going to cover how to make apps for the phone and tablet. So select that, and also I probably should mention this. The minimum SDK, you probably either want to put 8 or whatever the default is. Now, this is well, you guys know like the different versions of Android that came out. Of course, the later ones are the newest ones, but the reason that you just don't want to go ahead and develop for the latest one is because a bunch of people still have these older versions. So if you say, okay, well, I got, I don't know, maybe you got KitKat, so that's great, but whenever you put your app on the Google Play Store, check this out. It's only going to run on 25% of the devices. So if you go all the way back to Froyo, this was a really popular SDK. Whenever you develop apps for this, then it's going to run on pretty much all devices unless someone has like an old ancient phone. Now, if you're like, okay, well, with that logic and understanding, let me just go ahead back to the original API right there, and I should be good to go. Well, you don't want to do that either, because whenever you make an app that's compatible with all these ancient operating systems, it's going to involve a lot more code and a lot more testing, and it's going to be pretty much pointless because no one even has these anyways. So again, a good median for this is to go to API 8 at the time of this recording. Again, this is probably gonna change as time goes on. But right now, I would stick with API 8, and this makes sure that you cover pretty much every device that anyone would have, and you don't have to write any useless code. So let me adjust in my seat a little bit here. So now our next choice is, okay, add an activity to mobile. So we probably should understand what the heck is an activity. Of course, this is like the 2-second tutorial, so I'm just gonna explain it really simple. Ugh. Okay, probably should edit that out. You know, I'll probably just leave it in. Too lazy. Alright, so right now, just think of an activity as a screen. So if you're making an app for, I don't know, a website, the home screen would be its own activity. The about section would be another activity. So again, it's a little more complex than that, but for now, just think of an activity as a screen on your app or a view. So for this demonstration, we're just going to have blank activity. So what this is going to do is it's going to set up a template app with one screen on it, perfect for testing. So now, of course, we need to give our activity a name. Why do we need to give our activity a name? Well, that's just because whenever you're making an app with a bunch of different screens, you obviously need a way to identify all of them, because if you want to say, okay, switch to the home screen, switch to the, I don't know, my profile screen. Well, this is just how your app is going to identify each one and know what's going on. And we'll talk about the layout and all these different things later on. The layout is pretty much how things are positioned on the screen, and all this other stuff is kind of, you know, that's not the point of this tutorial. We'll cover that later on. But for now, just remember that this main screen is called main activity. Simple enough, and finish. Alright guys, so after Android Studio is finished setting up and preparing your project, you're going to have something that looks like this. And if you have an error right now, then I know what error that you're getting, so I'm going to show you guys how to fix that in just a second. But for now, I just want to warn you guys, even though it looks kind of overwhelming, trust me, this is set up perfectly for making apps in about 7 tutorials or something. Once we cover the entire interface, this is going to feel just like home, and all the stuff that feels overwhelming right now is actually you're probably gonna find it very useful. But for now, I'm gonna mention a couple things that are gonna make your life a whole lot easier. The first thing is, if you ever want to access that SDK manager from here, then what you do is you go up to this little thing. It kind of looks like the little, I think his name's Andy the Android. It looks like he's sitting in this bucket with a down arrow, but this is the Android SDK manager. So click that, and again, you don't have to close out of your entire project to open up the SDK manager anymore. And I actually want to show you guys one more package that I forgot to tell you guys to install later on. Earlier. So if you open up the SDK manager and you scroll all the way down, then make sure that you have this package installed right here. It's the Intel x86 emulator accelerator, and again, I installed it already, but it takes like 2 seconds to install. But what this is basically, whenever we develop these sample apps, what we're going to do is we're going to run those on pretty much emulators, or they're pretty much like little virtual phones that we can use for testing, and those are kind of slow. So that package just helps speed up the entire process and makes it run a little bit smoother and faster. So if you guys wanted to know what that was, there you go. If you didn't, well, sorry for wasting your time. But that's how you get to the Android SDK manager from here. Now another thing that I want to do is mention this. A lot of you guys probably have an error that popped up that says, okay, I can't find the Android SDK, or I don't know where the Java JDK is. You got to help me out because Android Studio won't run how it's configured right now. So if Android Studio has a problem finding either of those things, then go to File and go to Project Structure, and then from here it says, okay, the Android SDK location is where. And actually, if you see, like, I think if you get an error, it shows like some red text or something. But in order to navigate to it, if it's not set up correctly, just click these little 3 little dots on the right hand side, and then you can say, okay, you obviously aren't looking in the right place. This is where I downloaded my Android SDK. And the same thing with a Java Development Kit or the JDK. make sure that the directory ends with JDK in your version number, and make sure that the Android SDK ends with SDK. So again, if you downloaded it to a different directory than I did in the example, then you're going to have these errors. So that is where you fix them, depending on wherever you downloaded it. So mine is correct, so I'm just going to close out of that. And I probably should mention this as well. Alright, so just so every user is looking at the same thing, I'm going to change the app theme right here because this typically changes from user to user. So make sure, I'll show you guys, if you click on app theme right here, then the theme is pretty much the overall look and feel of your app. So switch yours to Material Light and click OK. And as you can see, your interface changes a little bit. Again, this is just so everyone is looking at the same thing, and you're not watching this tutorial and are like, okay, mine looks different than yours, and that's weird. Now, the last thing I want to mention before we actually run this is this. Right now, whenever I'm teaching these tutorials, you see that we have minimal screen size, and that's just because I wanted to make the window small enough where people with smaller monitors can see the videos clearly. Well, the problem with this is the screen, whenever we're developing this app, it looks kind of small. So in order to get rid of this phone body, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the settings, and you see it says include device frame. I'm going to uncheck that. So again, if you ever like developing and looking at the phone itself, maybe it gives you a better idea of what the application is going to look like, then do that. However, just to make sure that these tutorials are a little bit more clear, I'm going to get rid of that, and then we're going to see the interface a little more clearly. So once we're ready to run our app and test everything out, this is what I want you to do. Go up to Tools and select Android AVD Manager. Now, if you don't want to go through all those steps, you can also click this little button right here. This is just a shortcut to the AVD Manager. And the AVD Manager stands for Android Virtual Device Manager. So this, let me make this a little bit more clear. Alright, so this is where you manage all of your virtual devices. And again, a virtual device is just a little simulator, a little testing phone that you can make so you don't have to take an actual Android phone and plug it in your computer whenever you're developing apps and you want to test them out. So by default, whenever you download and install Android Studio, it comes with one virtual device. This is the Nexus 5. So that's what simulator phone comes built with it. But of course, if you ever want to make a new one, you just create virtual device by clicking that button down there. And you can actually create little simulator TVs and whatnot. But I'll talk you guys through how to create a virtual device. I don't know, maybe you want to create a same virtual device as the phone that you actually own. But for now, you can just use this one right here. Now, the reason that I'm not going to use this one and the reason that I built another one called Bucky's phone is something that you don't have to worry about. It's actually because whenever I'm recording these tutorials and I'm running this little simulator, it takes up a lot of space and it doesn't really show that great on my like whenever I'm making tutorials. So that's why I made Bucky's phone. It's pretty much the same thing, except I made it a lot smaller so it shows up better in my tutorials. But anyways, what you want to do is you want to click this little green button right by Nexus 5. I'm going to click mine called Bucky's phone, and this is going to launch, as you can see right here, the virtual device, which is pretty much just a simulator of a phone. Now, the first time you run this, it's going to take a long time to boot up because what it pretty much represents is you're buying a brand new phone, so it has to start it up for the very first time. And the reason that this takes so long is, if you think about it, what it's actually doing is it's building an entirely new operating system or an entirely new device within your computer. So it has to build a new phone with a new operating system that can run new apps. So that's why the entire build process and to get it up and running takes a little bit longer than you may like. So once your virtual device is up and running, and yours may look a little different than mine because I did run mine before, but to you it may simulate opening a brand new phone, so it's going to be like, welcome to Android, you're going to have to press OK, whatever. But anyways, you just click OK a bunch of times and then you're going to get to this screen right here. So this is the unlock screen, and of course, if you are used to an iPhone or something, the unlocking process is a little bit different than it is on Android. So just click and drag up, and that's going to unlock your phone. And as you can see, it's just like a normal phone. You can even browse the internet from here. But what we are worried about is running our application. So let's hop over back to Android Studio, and I'm just gonna close out of this. But what you want to do is you want to go up to this little button right here, and whenever you hover over it, it says Run App. So click that little green triangle, and what this is going to do is it's going to build your app for you, and it's actually going to give us one more option, I believe. Yep, right here. So it says, okay, we're building your app. Where do you want to test it out? So since we already have this emulator running right there, make sure that your radio button is checked, choose the running device, and of course you're probably only going to have one running, so you can just click OK. So what this is going to do is it's going to build it and it's going to launch it in our little simulator phone. So it takes a little bit of time, but don't worry, that's normal. But eventually, as you can see, what happens is it finally launches, and that's actually pretty cool that you don't have to actually go click on app and open it or anything. It just launches right for you. Pretty sweet. So we see that our application says My Application Hello World. Probably the coolest app ever invented. We could probably put this on Google Play right now and make at least like $10 million. But of course, what we want to do is actually jazz this up a little bit more before we put this bad boy for sale. So that is the process of how to build a very simple app and test everything out. Again, my guess is that since everyone's system is set up a little bit differently, if things don't run completely smoothly for you, or if you get any bugs or errors, please go to my forum, post your questions, and there are a lot of people willing and actually wanting to answer your questions for you, because whenever they answer someone's questions on the forum, they actually get these things called points. So you are encouraged to ask questions because they probably want questions to help you out with. But anyways, if you have any problems, that's what you do. Thank you guys for watching. In the next tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you guys something else that is definitely awesome. So I'll see you then. Alright guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a real quick overview of the interface, because whenever I first started out with Android Studio, it was all kind of overwhelming and kind of confusing. It just made me feel uncomfortable, not really knowing what any of this stuff was. So what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go through piece by piece and talk to you guys in detail what everything means. Instead, as we need the tools, that's when I'm going to be talking to you guys about, okay, so this is, the AVD manager, and this is how you use it. So instead of overwhelming you guys, giving you, the intricate details of what everything is, I just want to give you guys a real general overview to make you guys a little bit more comfortable with the interface. Blech, can't talk. Alright, so of course, at the very top, this is simple up here. We have the menu bar. Pretty much all of our additional tools and settings, as well as some, very common stuff we can find in the menu bar. Nothing new there. Now under it, we have a toolbar. So all of these little icons, this is actually called the toolbar right here. Now, as we saw in the last tutorial, what the toolbar is basically shortcuts to more commonly used aspects of the program. For example, maybe this SDK manager. Well, we can also get there with tools, Android SDK manager, but since we use that quite a bit, that's why they put that in the toolbar. Now, if you ever want to customize your toolbar, I recommend just keeping it the same, but if you ever have a tool that you find yourself using a lot, you can actually right click in this empty area and click customize menus and toolbars, and then you can click the little programs that you either want to remove or add. Again, you click on them and all of your settings are right here to either add them or remove them from your toolbar. Pretty intuitive. So that's what that little chunk of this Android Studio is. Now underneath this, this little thing right here that looks like I don't know, kind of a file directory explanation on like steroids or something. This is actually called the navigation bar, and basically what it is it shows the path to whatever current file you're working on. So this right here, the navigation bar, is pretty much the same as this thing up here. So it's pretty much a long file path. Now the cool thing about this is that, like I said, it is pretty much a file path on steroids, because if you ever go to a directory, you can actually click on it and it's going to show you all the contents of that directory. So pretty sweet. And again, it's a file path to whatever current file you're working on. So if you change a file, this is going to change as well. Now, this main area that I cannot ignore is the editor window. So the editor window is where we're going to be spending most of our time, and it's pretty much the main area to show whatever file you are currently working on. So right now, we'll talk about this designer later on. It's pretty much, as you probably could have guessed, how you lay out all the widgets and stuff for your interface. Now, we're also going to be looking at this a lot, which is pretty much the text view of the file, pretty much where we're going to be editing the source code and doing a bunch of cool stuff. But anyways, this main area shows whatever current file you're working on. You probably could have guessed that. Now over here on the left hand side, this is called the project window. Now whenever I am developing an app, what I like to do is I like to change this drop down from Android to project. So as you can see, whenever you change it to project, it's going to list every directory in your entire project. Now one of the most important directories is called app. Now this is where all your source code and all your like main layout files are. So if you just want a real condensed view of all the important files, then you can just hover down to Android, and I'll actually keep that on Android for this tutorial. But if you ever want an overview of your entire project, again, you can change that to project. But just for these tutorials, all the source code and stuff is in this Android drop down. So I'll stick with that. I don't know, I think it'll be a little bit easier, I guess. Alright, so we pretty much covered this whole interface except for these things on the side, these little bars that say like project, structure, all of that crap. So first of all, as you can see, whenever I click it, it toggles whatever window is on and off. So this is the project window, and I'm going to click that. It's going to toggle that visible, or I don't want to say it's invisible, but you know, visible, invisible, I'll say that, whatever. So if you ever feel that your entire interface, it just looks kind of cluttered and you decide that you want to hide all of these quick window bars, then go down in the very bottom left corner and you're going to see this little square gray icon. This is the toggle either to show or hide all of these quick window bars. So click that and they're all going to be hidden. Click it again, show them all, hide, show. Can do it all day if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and click that again so it shows them all, because that's the default. Now another thing I want to point out is if you hover over it, it's going to give you all of those quick windows. So I don't know, maybe you're on maybe you're on the structure and you want to get the project again, but you're too lazy to bring your mouse all the way back up there. So you can just go this, click project, and it's going to pop up for you. Again, just two different ways of doing the same thing. If you go to help, and by the way, that was basically the quick 2-second overview of the interface. Of course, there's a lot of other stuff, but like I said, I'm going to be covering those as we need them, as not to overwhelm you guys right now. So what I'm going to teach you guys right now are just little tips that you guys are probably going to thank me for, because they're just going to make your experience developing apps a whole lot better. First is if you go to help and you scroll down to default key map references. Let me actually minimize this, although I don't think it'll matter. What it's going to do is it's going to give you a PDF of all of the keyboard shortcuts that you can use for the program. So again, of course, I'm not going to go over any of these right now because that would just be dumb and boring. So instead, what I recommend is actually printing this out, laminating it, and putting it on every single wall in your room, because these are incredibly useful and you're going to be using them a lot. But actually for these tutorials, I don't like to use keyboard shortcuts because if like a window pops up and then you guys just see my mouse in the same place, you're like, okay, how the heck did you do that? And I don't know, it just gets confusing whenever I'm teaching, but they will be useful to you. Now, another thing that I want to show you guys that probably a lot of you guys are itching to do is change the theme of your entire Android Studio. I know a lot of you like a dark theme, so let me show you how to do that right now. If you go to File, Settings, and this was something else. Alright, so File, Settings, and if you go to Appearance and then Theme, by default this is IntelliJ or whatever it is. Windows one is pretty much a lighter theme, but the font's a little bit different. In Darkula, I don't want to change it because my screen recorder is probably gonna tweak out if I change the entire theme. But right now, I'm gonna keep this one because I love it. Darkula is the dark one that you guys might be looking for. Windows, if you like really ugly, stupid looking font, then you can choose that too. So of course, after this, you would just hit apply and then okay, but I like mine, so I'm just gonna actually, while I'm in here, I'll talk to you guys about a few more things. Alright, so first of all, actually let me back out of here so you guys can see what I'm about to teach you. Alright, so first of all, whenever we're working with a text file, just go ahead and click any Java file to open up. We're not going to be talking about the source code right now, but I'm going to be showing you guys some useful things of how to actually work with it. As you can see, the gutter on the left hand side, for some reason, and I'm not sure why, but every IDE and every text editor pretty much that I ever downloaded, it doesn't show the line numbers by default. And I have no idea why they do that because I always love looking at the line numbers. So to display the line numbers on this one, it's actually really easy. Just right click anywhere in the gutter, that's the gray area, and click show line numbers. Pretty sweet, check that out. Now another thing that I absolutely hate is this code folding. That's pretty much when you have a bunch of code, like an entire body of a function or this right here, and it bunches it up for you. Now the reason I hate this is because I love looking at all of the code, and also for the tutorials, if you guys are trying to copy the source code and you're like, okay, I need to know what he imported, but oh, that's great, it's all bunched up. It's really annoying even to me, and I'm sure it's even more annoying to you. So if you want to get rid of all of the code folding, as it's called, go to File and back in Settings. Let me minimize this, make sure you guys see everything, and go to that's console folding. Go to Editor under the IDE settings and code folding, and right here this first checkbox is just to show the code folding outline, and that's that little arrow you can click to either bunch it up or expand it. But what I want to do is I want to uncheck all of these, so none of my code is going to be folded. Again, once I apply this, as you can see, my actual area that you guys can see may be a little bit bigger, but whenever you guys are trying to read my source code in the tutorials, then it's going to make it a whole lot easier. So again, I highly recommend putting line numbers on by right clicking, showing line numbers, and getting rid of code folding because I absolutely hate it. Personal preference, but you know, gotta encourage you guys to do the same. So in the next couple tutorials, now that we are kind of more familiar with the interface, we can get into the good stuff, actually creating an app, the interface, and well, it's gonna be awesome. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial, what I want to do is I want to show you guys how to create your own custom AVDs, of course your virtual devices. I showed you guys how to use the default one earlier, but if we want to become expert app developers from the ground up, that's where we need to start. We need to understand pretty much what goes on behind the scenes, because after all these apps that people develop, they would be pretty worthless if we didn't have any phones or tablets to run them on. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and in the next tutorial, I think I said that last time, but in the next tutorial, I promise, we're going to be getting into the code, the designer, all that good stuff. So for now, hop up to this little thing. Remember, this is the AVD manager, and again, I already told you guys that I created my own custom one right here, and in the last example you guys may have ran this one, and it may have taken up your whole screen, probably pretty annoying. So in this tutorial what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to create your own custom AVDs. So first of all, go down here to this little button and click create virtual device. Now of course the first thing we have to choose is what device do you want to create. Do you want to create a TV, a phone, a wearable like a watch, or a tablet? Well, I'm just going to go to phone, and then once I click that I get all of the definitions of phone. Now don't let the word definition fool you. These are pretty much just different phones. Like if you went into, I don't know, like a Verizon store or like a Best Buy or something, this is pretty much the equivalent of picking out which phone that you want. So of course this edited one is one that I was working on earlier, but let's just go ahead and pick out, let's use the Galaxy Nexus. That was actually a pretty popular one. So this is the Galaxy Nexus phone. Now the first thing that I want to do is I actually want to clone this, because if I start just editing this, then it's going to mess up the default settings. So you always want to clone it, and this is going to allow you to use a copy that if you mess up with, then you just messed up the copy, no big deal. So first of all, since this is our own custom phone, I'm going to name this thing anything that I want. So we'll say that I don't know, we'll say that we're making the slimmest phone in the world. So I'm going to call my phone Slim Shady, the new phone that's going to wipe out Samsung, wipe out Motorola. Slim Shady is the next big thing. Alright, so anyways, there's my little daydream. Another thing that I want to point out is all of this stuff, again, we're going to be customizing a bunch of stuff on this phone later on, but this is pretty much the hardware configuration. Now you don't really ever want to change the hardware configuration of your phone, because it's not like they ever release phones with like 720 by 18 million pixels. You know, the hardware always stays the same for the most part. It's the software that changes. So again, give your device or your phone a custom name and click finish. And now if you go to phone, you can see, okay, this is our custom phone, same hardware, we didn't do anything stupid to it. So click on it and choose next. So now that we have pretty much the phone itself, and by that I mean just the hardware, we can go ahead and start working on the system image. So this is pretty much saying what version of Android do you want to use. Now I recommend putting the latest one on it, just because, I don't know, you know that, knocked over my mouse. Actually, by the way, this has nothing to do with app development or anything, but I started to get like carpal tunnel symptoms. So whenever I would type like my entire arm, there would be like a nerve that shot up, and I'll be like, oh my god, in the middle of my tutorial. So I got this cool little glove that had like beanbags in it, and I also got these things called a vertical mouse. So go to Google and type in vertical mouse. That's what I'm using. It's like this goofy looking mouse that I don't know, it kind of looks dangerous to be honest. But anyways, got a little sidetracked there. Back to the video. So what we want to choose is what version of Android do we want to put on that phone we just made. Well, a system image is pretty much just a copy of all the system files and settings. Pretty much just think of it as like your main system, your main computer. So the one I like to use is just x86 from Google. These all are open source, but I always just went with Google because, I don't know, they have like the best developers in the world, and you always know that their system image is nice, working correctly. It never gave me any problems, so I like to choose that one. Click next. Now here is where I like to do a couple of things to pretty much customize my virtual device. So again, this name looks pretty good. Alright, that looks good, that looks good. One thing that I like to do is I like to go to scale, and right now the one you just saw, Bucky's phone, that was 4dp on device, 1 pixel on screen. Now what this does is it just shrinks it to make it fit better on your screen, because again, this screen size of the phone, it might be bigger than your desktop screen size. So again, whenever you're developing, it's going to give you some problems. I usually choose 4dp on device, 10dp, is like a really mini phone. It looks like, I don't know, like the size of your, it's just way too small. So again, I'm going to choose, that was embarrassing. Anyways, moving on. So yeah, that's what I like to do. Now, another thing I want to point out is this emulated performance, you can only choose one of these. And I'm going to recommend use host GPU. Now, what this does is it allows the emulator to use your computer's graphics card, the actual computer, your desktop or laptop or whatever, to make it run faster. Now, this snapshot, what this would do is it will pretty much keep the state of your emulator, so whenever you close out of it, it starts up faster again. So the reason I don't like this is because whenever you close your emulator, it has to save everything and it takes a little bit of time to close out. So I'm going to recommend use host GPU, which pretty much speeds up your emulator, and during your development process you can just keep your phone running. So you know, as long as you keep it running, you shouldn't have any issues at all. So now that we have our virtual device set up, just click finish, and this takes a while to actually create it. But once we have it created, again, what we can do is we can actually edit it to go to this button. And of course, if you ever want to change any settings, maybe, okay, that was actually a little too small, so I'm going to boost that size up. You can do it right there. And of course, to test it out, you can just click this green button right here. Now, while this is booting up, again, like I said, during your development process, you can actually just leave this entire emulator running. You don't need to close out of it like I don't know, maybe in some other like programming languages you're learning, you actually close out of a program whenever you're testing it and then rebuild it. Well, the cool thing is you can just keep this window open and then click this to rebuild your project, and it's pretty much just going to restart the app right in your emulator, so you don't have to wait for this to boot up every time. So again, there you go. There's your emulator. Again, this one was just a demonstration. I'm going to delete it because I already have that sweet one, Bucky's phone, that I'm going to use for the tutorials. But if you ever want to make your own custom emulators, your AVDs, or edit them, delete them, now you know how. So now that we know how to make those, we can finally move on to the good stuff. It's going to be awesome. So I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Alright guys, welcome to another tutorial, and in this video, what I want to do is I want to explain pretty much the overall structure of a really basic, simple app. So make sure that you have, and these files should already be open because they probably open by default whenever you created your project, but if you accidentally close them, make sure you have this activity main.xml open, and that's of course an app, res, layout, activity main, and this one right here, main activity.java, and that's of course an app, Java, your com.thenewboston, my app, or whatever you named it package, and this file right here. So again, these two files open, and remember in the last couple tutorials I said every single app is made up of these things called activities. Now for now, just think of an activity as a screen. So if you're making an app for, I don't know, like your website, you might have an activity for your profile page, you might have an activity for the home screen, you might have an activity for like the about section for your company or something, I don't know. But each app, like I said, is made up of these screens, and these screens, the technical name for them is an activity. So, with that being said, we can now talk about this. Each activity within your app is made up of two parts. The first part is the part we see right here. It's the user interface. It's where all your colors, your text, pretty much the design of your activity is going to be right here in this XML file. Now the brains of your activity is this Java file right here. For example, whenever you have a button on your activity and you click it, well, you need to tell that button to do something. So the smart intelligence of your activity is going to be all in this code, the Java file. So again, your app is made up of activities, different screens. Now each screen has pretty much a user interface, the design, and the smarts of it, or the brains of it, and that's a Java class. So pretty much, if we ever wanted to make another activity, what we would do is we would create a new class with a new name and a new XML file. Simple enough. So now that we understand pretty much the basic overview of what an activity is and what they're made up of, we can start talking about the different components of it. So hop over to this XML file, which I said is pretty much the interface, the layout of your entire app, what it looks like. Now, if you look at the bottom, we have two different tabs right here, the design view and the text view. Now, I want to mention this because this might confuse some people. This is actually just two different views of the same exact file. What Android Studio did is they built this tool that is pretty much just a user-friendly tool of working with the interface, but what it's actually doing whenever you, I don't know, like edit part of your interface, is it's actually editing an underlying file for you, and that's the XML file. So you can either do that with the design tool by dragging and dropping stuff and editing some settings, or just editing the source code directly. So let's actually go ahead and look at an example of this. The first thing I want to do is get rid of this. So hop over to your XML file in design view, click on this hello world, and then just hit delete on your keyboard. So we have a blank nothing here. So the first thing I probably should mention is this. What you can do to each of your activities is you can add widgets to them. Now, widgets are just little thingies that you add to your interface. And I say thingies because there's not really one word to describe all these things. For example, let's add one of these large text areas. And this is pretty much to add any static, not changing text. So let's just go ahead and drag that in the middle and type anything you want. So if you actually drag it in the middle, you're going to see these little green grid lines, and that's just to align everything properly. Now if you double click this, then you can edit the text of it, and I'm just going to type in like the new Boston, hit enter, and it changes. So it's really intuitive like that, not really hard to figure out. So you can also add some more widgets if you want. Again, like I said, I'm just demonstrating how to use the basic tools, so feel free to drag any of these widgets on if you just want to play around with it. For example, you have radio buttons and progress bars, all that stuff. So again, widgets are just thingies that you can add to your interface. Now again, you can either do that in design mode or text mode. So whenever you click text mode, it actually shows you a little preview right here, which is actually nice. So let's go ahead and just add one little property. So in your XML file right here, just so I don't leave you guys hanging and I do explain everything. If you guys never worked with XML before, it's pretty much like HTML, but you can use cool names for your tags. So if you don't know HTML or XML, then I'll probably recommend going to watch those tutorials. But as long as you know HTML, then you guys will probably be able to follow along with these tutorials fine. So again, a real quick overview. We're going to be talking about this in detail later on. This tutorial is just to give you guys a basic understanding. So right now, our main tag right here is a relative layout. Now, a layout is just a general overview of it's saying how widgets should be positioned on the screen. And there are different types of layouts that we can have, but it's pretty much the overall rules of how things can be laid out. Now, this text view right here is just this widget right here. So each widget you add actually adds a new XML element to your file. So say that we wanted to change the background color of this right here. Well, what we would do is actually go up to relative layout and add a new attribute. For right now, I just want to show you guys, if you type Android colon and type background, then what you can do is you can actually type in a value here. Now this is actually one of my favorite colors, 006699. It's a blue color that I use on my website a lot. So again, you can also pretty much edit the interface this way through the source code. So again, the XML is your interface. We looked at how to change it with design, this design tool, and we're probably going to be using this one more often. And also the source code directly is pretty much just like a website, kind of like Dreamweaver if you ever use that. So yeah, and actually what I want to do is actually click this widget right here, and you see that I just clicked that and it gave me some problems. What I'm going to do is hit Control Z, and I'm going to show you guys this little tip. over here in their component tree is pretty much an overview of your entire activity. So this is your entire screen. This is the layout of how the widgets are supposed to be arranged. And right here, I'm going to click text view. So if you ever have a bunch of widgets and they're kind of hard to select, maybe they're close together or whatever, you can actually just select it right in this component tree and it's going to select it for you. So again, deselect it, select it again, make selecting your widgets a little bit easier. Actually, what I want to do to this is change the color of the text to white. So I'm going to select that widget, and I know the property for this is text color. So if I find that, I'm just going to click in, well, I guess I can just type it in and I know the value. The value of white is FFFFFF. And hit enter and check it out. Your text is now white. Probably the coolest app ever. Again, this tool right here, it isn't really that hard to understand, but we'll cover more about it later on. Got your widgets, component tree, properties, drag and drop, tomato, tomato. So now let's go ahead and hop over to this. Now there's actually one more file that I want to show you before I let you go. So each activity, like I said, is an XML and Java file. However, go up to your app and you're going to find a directory under it called manifest. Now expand this and you're going to find another XML file called Android manifest.xml. Now double click that to open it, and let me drag this all the way to the left. Alright, so to recap one more time, your app is more likely than not going to have a bunch of different activities. Now this Android manifest right here, think of this like is the main manager for your app. It's where everything comes together. If you have a bunch of activities floating around, they can be kind of hard to keep track of. So what this does, again, it's the main file that pretty much manages your entire app. So each activity that you create, this is actually going to be a new element in the Android manifest file. So I'll actually talk to you guys about this right now. As soon as your application starts, of course, your phone doesn't know what to do. It says, okay, where do I go? You have a bunch of different activities. What am I supposed to be doing? The very first thing that your phone's going to do is it's going to look for a file called Android manifest.xml. So it says, okay, I'm always going to look for this file right here. And right after I open this file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all of your activities. Now, right now, we only have one activity, so it shouldn't take it too long to find, but it's going to look through all your activities right here, and it's going to look for a property called, actually all these properties are kind of important, but it's going to look for a property called launcher. Now this launcher is pretty much saying that this is the main activity that you want to launch first. This is where your app's starting point is. So it says, okay, I found it, now let's check out this activity. Alright, so it says the launcher is the main activity. So from here, you want me to go to the main activity. So it hops over here, and then it says, okay, well, what's the deal with this main activity? Well, all of this we'll talk about later. Essentially, all this activity does right now is it sets this as your layout, activity underscore main, right there. So again, 3 very important files, but that's essentially all our app is doing right here. Again, I'm going to be covering the details of everything later on, but your phone is going to look at this first, Android manifest.xml. It's going to look for the activity that it's supposed to launch. Now ours says go to main activity, and all main activity does right now, can't talk, is it launches this layout. So what the user does is they click to open this app and they see this layout, but now we know what's going on behind the scenes, so we can edit it and start making some really awesome stuff. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and well, I'll see you guys later. Alright guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and in this video, actually the first thing I want you guys to do in this tutorial is go to your kitchen and grab a huge bucket of popcorn, and then after that go to your bedroom and grab the most comfortable blanket you can possibly find, and then come back, because once you have both those things, you're ready to hear the story, probably the greatest story I ever told. This story is called The Life of an Activity. So, you know, if you're an Android developer, this might be a pretty interesting story, definitely pretty useful. it starts out like this. Every activity that you ever create is going to be a subclass of the special class that we didn't see yet called the activity class. So out there somewhere there's this activity class, and every activity that you create we're going to inherit from. Now remember, whenever we inherit from something, we get all of the cool methods from that class. Now if you're looking at this and you're like, okay, I can clearly see that main activity extends action bar activity. And extends just means inherit, of course, you guys know. So this is actually a subclass of action bar activity, but you said that every activity that I create is going to inherit from this activity class. Well, even though you can't see it directly right here, this action bar activity is inheriting from another class, and that class is inheriting from activity. So this main activity that we just created is like fourth generation of the awesome activity class. But I just want to mention that because if you guys are looking at all these methods, you're like, okay, where did all these methods come from that I'm overriding? Well, they came from that activity class, and all this class is it's pretty much a basic template that gives us a bunch of cool functions that we could use on whatever activities we create. So that's the purpose of that. So since we have all these cool functions, let's talk about what they are and why we need them. Well, every activity that you create, it goes through a certain life cycle. Now, the first thing that happens is it calls this method called onCreate. So whenever the user first starts your app for the very first time and your activity is born, it gets created. Now, in this activity, what you typically do is you set the layout. Of course, that makes sense. The very first thing you want to do is give the user a nice interface set up to look at. Now, just a real quick overview, and I'm going to talk to you guys about this in detail in just a second, but eventually, whenever they close out of your app, it's going to call other methods like onDestroy. So whenever your app, whenever your activity is about to get destroyed or die, what you might want to do is do things like save their data for them. So if they, I don't know, are playing a game or something, you might want to save all of their settings so they can have it the next time they open your app. So basically what I'm trying to say is each activity that you create is going to go through many different stages in its life, or many different states as it's more commonly referred to. So in this tutorial, that's what I'm going to be doing, talking to you about every single state and the details of each. So the first thing that you actually probably want to do is start your emulator, because I know they kind of take a long time to boot up, and we're actually going to be tweaking some of this code and changing some things. So yeah, go ahead and do that. Now another thing I want to mention is this. I'm going to be talking to you guys through each stage of your activity's life, and instead of just me explaining it and talking through it, I figured it would be a better idea to actually print something out on the screen every time the state of your activity changed. So what we can do is we can actually import this cool class, and this is another tip. You guys are learning like 2 things in this tutorial. Bonus information. Alright, so if you go to android.util.log, what this is pretty much a package that lets us print out log information. And all we're going to do is we're going to print out something on the bottom of the screen that says like your activity is being created or something. So that's all we're doing. Alright, so once we have that imported, go above all your methods, and we're going to make a new, let me scroll down here. We're going to make a new private static final string variable, not string, and I'm just going to name this tag, and it's good convention to name it tag just because in the documentation for this is just what you do, and you guys are going to see what this does in a second. Well, I probably should talk you guys through this. So the purpose of this tutorial is to talk to you guys about the different states of your activity. Now, by default, your emulator is going to be sending out a bunch of different messages pretty much when any event happens, and there's a lot of crap that happens on your phone, but we are only interested in these messages regarding states. So just to filter out the important messages, we're going to make a special tag and stick it on each activity. It's going to be called Bucky's message. You can actually name this anything you want because it's just like a unique identifier to say only print out these log messages and not all the other crap that we don't care about. Alright, so once we have that, what I want you to do is go down to onCreate right here, and I'll show you guys how to add one of these log messages. So if you go log.I, what you can do is you can throw in two parameters right here. The first parameter is your tag. So this is just Bucky's message, and this is just for filtering out the important ones later on. Now after this is what do you want to print out on the screen, and I'll just actually print out the state of this activity. So again, that's all these 3 lines of code do right here. And they're actually really helpful whenever you're trying to debug something in your Android development process. Now another tip that's going to make your Android Studio development process a little bit easier is this thing called code completion. And I'll show you guys how it works right now. So under this method right here, click where you would first start writing your method, and then hold down the Alt key on your keyboard and hit Insert. So right here, it's going to pop up a bunch of different things. What we want to choose is override methods, because remember, we're pretty much inheriting all these methods from the activity class. However, we just want to customize them to add our own custom log message, just so we can see what's going on. So click override methods, and then it's going to give us a bunch of different options to override. So these are saying, okay, what method do you want to use? Pretty much do you want us to fill in for you? Well, there's actually this method called onStart. So if you scroll down a little bit right here, onStart, and hit OK, there we go. Saves us some time. Again, it took a little bit it took a while for me to just explain it, but if you're just doing it to yourself, it takes like 5 seconds, so pretty sweet. But anyways, now that we have this onStart method, what I want to do is actually just copy this to add another log that's going to print out on our screen, and I'm just going to add onStart. Now instead of me doing the exact same thing over and over and over again, what I actually did is I took all of the methods that I want to overwrite and I actually put it on my forum. So if you go to my forum, again, this is the URL. I'll put this below the video if you guys just want to click on it. But check this out. I put all the source code right there, so go ahead and copy this and hop over back to Android Studio and paste it back in. And I actually can delete this because I copied that too. But now it saved you a bunch of typing. Pretty sweet. So all this program is going to do is it's going to print out a little message on the screen every time your activity changes states. Again, you would never want to do this in the actual app. This is just to demonstrate when each of these stages are going to happen, but for this example, it's actually pretty useful. So, like I said before, whenever we use this little log program right here, by default, it's going to be printing out a bunch of random log messages. Pretty much everything that's going on in your phone or your little emulator is going to try to print out. But what we are only interested in are these log messages that we created right here. So we need to build a real quick filter. So to do that, head over to your Android tab right here, click on it, and alright, so those are a bunch of, see, these are all the ones we don't want to see, and this is just because my emulator is running right now. So obviously we want to make a filter, and this is how you do this. And another thing I want to point out is this is just a nice little Easter egg. If you look at this logcat symbol, you're going to see that it's actually the Android head, and this is actually I don't even know how to pronounce it, but you know that YouTube video where it's like that cat that looks like he's attached to a Pop-Tart or something with a rainbow coming out of his butt? That's a little symbol for that. So I don't know, I just thought that was a cool little Easter egg. Alright, so anyways, back to building our filter. What we're going to say is any log message that has this tag attached, Bucky's message, only show those. So make sure whatever string you have here, copy this. Now in the drop down right here, select edit filter configuration. This allows us to build a filter right here. Now I actually already did this, but my microphone was off, so that's why this is filled in right here. I have a weird microphone, and when you put it up, it mutes itself, and so yeah, I just filmed for about 5 minutes, and then I was trying to edit the video, and I'm like, oh, can't hear anything because I'm a moron. So again, you're gonna have to call yours anything you want. I'm just gonna call mine Bucky Filter, and the only other thing you have to add is by log tag regex, just stick this right in here. So it's gonna say, okay, filter equals built. So now instead of no filters, which show everything, we can only show log messages with this attached. Pretty sweet. So now just go ahead up to here and run your app. Now keep your eye on this little section right here, because whenever our app actually builds itself and pops up, it's going to start displaying those state messages. So of course choose OK and check it out. Alright, so our app is loading and it switched back to this thing, you SOB, so I'm going to switch it back to Bucky's filter, but check this out. Let me position this so you guys can see it. Alright, so the first thing it printed out was onCreate. Now I already told you guys, and you obviously know what that method does. It pretty much just sets up the interface. Now after that, on start, this method always gets called right after either onCreate or on restart. So what on start means is pretty much your app is about to start up. That's the most simple I can explain it. Now on resume, what this means is it's a method that always gets called whenever your activity is the one that the user currently has open. So remember, anytime you want to add code that says, okay, the user is now looking at this screen, this is the activity that they have open, you can stick that in on resume. Now just to show you guys some cool stuff, whenever you actually close out of your app, hit the home button right here, look what happens. The first thing it does is it calls on pause, and then it says on save instant state, and then on stop. Now on pause, what this means is the user is no longer seeing your activity. So whenever, of course, I was looking at that screen, now I'm no longer looking at it, then on pause gets called. Now another reason on pause may get called is maybe I just switched screens and I'm now looking at a new one. So again, those are two different times when your app is going to call on pause. Pretty much when your user is looking at the screen and they're not looking at it anymore. Now instead of talking to you guys about on save instant state in detail and on stop, there's actually a lot more different states than this. What you guys can do is, I found this image online that is absolutely awesome, and I stuck it in that same URL. So what you can see here is a pretty awesome visualization of every single state in your activity. Now again, I wanted to show you guys this because right now, if I talk about every single one of these things in detail, it's probably going to be a little overwhelming and kind of pointless right now. So instead, what I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to talk about these now that we understand what they are and that they do exist. I'm going to talk about each state as we need them. Alright guys, welcome back, and in this video, I want to start talking about designing the user interface. It's one of the more fun and also one of the more easier to understand topics. And actually what I decided to do is, instead of working anymore with this, I actually want to start a brand new project. So to close out of this, click File, Close Project, and actually if you just close out of Android Studio, like you want to start a new project, so you just close out of the entire thing and then you open it back up again, then what it's going to do is it would just open up that project again. So if you ever want to get back to this window, you would have to click File, Close Project. So if you're trying to do that and that's why, well, I just explained it for you. So from here, what I want to do is click Start a New Android Studio Project. And you can actually name this anything you want, since we're just going to be like, I don't know, not doing anything real important to it. I'm going to name mine Hand Blaster, because why not? And all of these should be good from last time. Click Next. This is still good. We're still making something for the phone. Now, instead of like last time where we chose blank activity, what this would do is it would make that one default blank screen. But I want to show you guys how to add activities manually. So instead of this, choose Add No Activity. So when you click Finish, what's going to happen is it's going to load up, and you're pretty much going to have an empty, completely empty project. I mean, it's going to have those core files, but check it out. Alright, so when it's done setting up, this is what you get. Now, obviously, if we click on project on the left hand side, we can see that it does indeed have some files created for us, but definitely no activities or screens anywhere. And well, our app would be pretty stinking useless if the user didn't have any screen to look at. So let's go ahead and do that first. So make sure you're in Android view. You can actually look at project view if you want, but I'm going to be in Android view. And in your app, expand that and go to Java, expand that as well. Now remember, this is where we're going to be building that activity. If you remember from last time, this is actually where that file was. So now if you right click it and select new, scroll down to activity and we'll just choose blank activity. So again, once we're looking at this screen, what this is basically if we clicked blank activity whenever we're setting up our project, then this is where we would be. But that's how you do it manually. And also whenever you add additional activities to whatever projects we're working on in the future, that's how you do that. So remember it. Now, for right now, this example is only going to have one activity, so I really don't need to give anything like a name because I'm not really going to get disorganized with one activity. However, since this is the only activity, it's very important that you choose this launcher activity. Now remember, the launcher activity is the very first screen that whenever Android is trying to open your app, it's going to look for this. So without it, if you have a bunch of activities and none of them are the launcher activity, then your app's not going to open correctly. So since this is our only activity, we need to make it the launcher activity, aka the starting point. So as soon as you create an activity, what Android Studio is going to do is it's going to create those two files for us. Let me make sure this looks nice and pretty for you guys. Alright, so of course, you remember that main activity, that Java, the brains behind it, and the interface. No need to discuss everything because you guys already know what all that means. So one other thing I want to point out is you're like, okay, wait a minute, there was one more thing. You said that all of my activities had to be taken care of in the manifest. So let me just look at the manifest, and we'll probably have to do something here, open this, and oh, check it out. Android Studio actually took care of all of that for us. Whenever we just created that new activity, again, in the manifest, this is where all your activities have to be declared. It did everything for us. Pretty stinking awesome. That is also another reason I love Android Studio. So just close out of that and we can continue with the good stuff. So over in activity underscore main.xml, the first thing I want to do is delete this little thing right here, this text view. So just go ahead, select it like before, and just delete it. Now, just for this example, this is just to demonstrate a few things. So I'll say that I'm building the very first page to the best social network ever, thenewboston.com. Not like I'm biased or anything. I mean, it's not even like it's my social network. But anyways, so what we need are a couple things. The first thing is this large text. Alright, so that's a little bit easier to read. I'm just gonna organize everything before I start customizing any of these widgets. So drag in large text, and we'll say that this says like sign in or login. So this will be the login screen. So under this, of course, we need two little input areas for the user to enter their login information, an email and a password. So first, let's get that email. Scroll down. It's actually under text fields. So click that if it's not expanded. In for email, just drag that over, and we can tell when it's aligned with the middle because of this little green line. So drop that right there. Alright, looks pretty good. Now under here, we'll have a password field. So drag that and drop it somewhere under there. Looks good. Now, of course, if I was actually designing this, then what I would do is I would have to make a little text area here that says email and password. But for right now, just demonstrating some stuff, this is, simple enough. Now, of course, after they're done typing in their information, they need some button to click on. So if we scroll way back up, isn't way back up, it's like 2 inches away. But we're gonna select this button and drag it right underneath here, and we'll actually align this in the dead center of your app by using those little alignment things. And alright, looking pretty good. So what I want to do now is I actually want to change the text on this right here and also on the button. So again, this is a login screen, so if I hop over, actually I'll change one this way. So select this large text view element. If we scroll down to a property called text, then what we can see is, okay, right now it's set to large text. That's the text that displays. What we actually want to do is click on this, and we'll change it to something like sign in and hit enter. So of course we can change the text that way. Alright, pretty sweet. Now if we hop over to the source code view, then let's go ahead and change the text on the button through here. So of course right now it just says new button. That's the default. Let's go ahead and change this to, for some reason I don't like when the button text is the same as the title text, so I'm going to change this to log in. Alright, sweet. So the title says sign in and this says log in. Now another thing that's kind of annoying me is I hate when there's not enough space for the user to actually type in their information, and these little edit text areas, or inputs if you call them if you're a web designer, they're kind of kind of like bunched, not enough room there. So what I'm going to do is in this first one, I'm going to add a new attribute, and the attribute to actually just make this a little bit wider is Android, Android, and its width. Now I'll talk to you guys about, you see that whenever you're, alright, I probably should mention this. So if you're a web designer, you probably use either pixels or percentage or EM if you work with text a lot. However, whenever you're making apps, you're going to use these special things called DP, and those are device pixels. And I'll talk to you guys about the different units of measurement right now, but just so you guys have a real basic understanding, if you had a phone that was high def, for example, so it was 1920 by 1080 or even 1280 by 720, that just means how many pixels are on there. You could have a computer screen or a TV that's 1280 by 720, or you could have a little phone that's 1280 by 720. So if you try to work with pixels, you really don't know how big a pixel is because the size of a pixel changes from device to device. So if you use these DP, they give you a little bit more control, and again, that's just why we use DP for right now. I'll talk more about that later. It's going to make a lot more sense. But for right now, I want to change this to something like 320 DP wide, because I know that that is a good width right there, and I actually want to do the same for this right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that, scroll down, and paste that into. So now both of these things are 320 wide, looking pretty sweet. So let's hop back over in Designer, and alright, I mean, this interface is looking beautiful right now. However, there's one other little thing that I want to point out. So select the top text view widget, the sign-in title, and whenever you select it, you're going to notice that there is a light bulb on the left hand side. So let's go ahead and click this and find out what's this about. Okay, hard-coded string. Okay, so it's giving us a little warning message, and what this warning message is saying is what you should do is, instead of just writing a string in there like we just did, you should treat this as a resource. So let me first show you guys how to treat this as a resource, and then I'm going to tell you exactly why. So make sure, again, you select your widget, click the light bulb, now click the little right arrow next to here, and choose extract string resource. It's kind of hard to say. So right here, what we're pretty much doing is, I don't want to say that this is a variable because it's technically a resource, but if you never worked with like XML before, or resources, or you never developed for Android before, you're probably not really familiar with this. What we pretty much need to do is give a nickname to this string. So I'm just going to name it something like sign in, title, and then that's it. Click OK. Now, as you can see, what's going to happen is instead of sign-in title like we had, it changes to this weird @string sign-in title thing. So let's hop over in the source code and look what's going on. So of course, it changed back to sign in as it should, but if we look at the text now, we still have a reference to the resource instead of the string itself. So what exactly is happening? Well, to understand, what we need to do is we actually need to open a new file, and this file is under app, just like before, res. This actually stands for resource. Now under values, you're going to have a file called strings.xml. Now, alright, let me adjust my seat because I'll explain this. So the reason that we needed to make this a resource is because we're pretty much saying put all of the strings in one place, in one file, and then I'm just going to reference them through XML. So again, whenever we reference a string, it's going to look in this file, it's going to look for that resource name, and this one was sign-in title, and then it's going to say, okay, that was actually equal to sign in. So that's the value of this. Now, if we did something like sign in with an exclamation mark, we can just switch over, and that would change, no problem. So again, what we're doing is we're pretty much putting a placeholder right here, and it references something else. Now you were wondering, okay, well, what was the problem with just writing sign in my source code right here? Why'd it give me a hard time? Well, the reason that it wants all of your strings in one place, it's because if you ever do something like you want to translate your app to Spanish, well, what you can do is you can actually just say, okay, you don't have to look around your entire app and say, okay, this is a string, now this is a string, now I have to go to 100 other activities and find all of those. No, you just look at one file, it has all the strings for your entire app, and you just translate it right there. And there's a bunch of other useful things too, but pretty much it makes your app's life a whole lot easier when all the strings are organized in one file. So that's why we did that, and also, since this is a string as well, it's probably a good idea to do it to this. So again, select your button, click the light bulb, right arrow, extract string resource, and for this I'll just call it something like, I don't know, like sign in button text. And choose OK. And of course, if we can see, on our button, instead of that text, we have a reference to it, but of course whenever we're running our app, they don't see this weird reference symbol. And again, anytime you see an @ sign, that means that this isn't a hard-coded string, this is actually a reference to something else. So again, that's what's going on right there. Now, one other thing I want to point out is this. So we're going to be referencing a bunch of stuff, and we know why that's useful right now. And actually, go into your strings.xml file and close this out, because typically we're not going to have that open. However, what if you wanted to change the text to this? Well, you can go back in the folder, go all the way, find that file again, but that takes a lot of time. So instead, what you can do is in the source code, that XML, press down Control on your keyboard, and you see whenever you do this, then you can actually hover over these references. Now click, and whenever you click it, it opens up that file again. So pretty sweet. Again, I don't know, maybe you want to change that sign in to, I don't know, maybe you want to get rid of that symbol at the end. Again, hold down Control, and this actually works for any reference, but what we want to do is click that, the file opens again, and that line of code is actually highlighted. So now I can close that, and boom, check it out. So those are some really cool tips, and now you guys know how to manually add activities. You guys also know how to add strings as a reference. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Now, one other thing I want to mention before I let you guys go is this. So right now we're making something called a static layout. It's a layout that's not going to change. We don't want to make like a sign-in form where the button's like floating around and the user has to click it to sign in. I mean, if you were making a game, that would be great. But for right now, we always want everything to be in the same place. However, there are going to be some layouts, maybe like the stream, if you're reading like a bunch of posts, that actually change. So of course that feed goes up and down as you scroll with your thumb, and also with games, maybe there's like a bird flying around that you have to click, or maybe you have to like make tanks that are moving around. Well, whenever you need a layout that's interactive like games, then we're going to need to do something special. And what we actually do is, instead of using this, the designer in the XML, we're going to be making our layout in Java. It's going to be pretty sweet, but also pretty easy to understand. So yeah, I'm pumped up. That's what I'm going to be teaching you guys in the next tutorial, how to make interactive layouts. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will smell you later. Alright guys, welcome back to another video tutorial. Never know what to say. Do I call it a tutorial or video? Who knows? But welcome back, and in this video what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to make a user interface entirely in Java. Now, if you didn't watch my last video, I gave a quick explanation right at the end, but basically whenever you use that designer, it's really good for making static or just user interfaces that don't change a lot. But whenever you have something like a game or any interface where things are moving around, it's useful to create your objects in Java. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So close out of any project you have, hit File, Close, and then you can start a new one. I'm just going to name this like, let's name it Allison, because I have a crush on this girl named Allison. Let me center this. And all of this stuff looks good. You can actually name it anything you want. And of course we're making it for the phone, and choose blank activity right here and hit next. Now this is alright, so pretty much just give it a name and keep all the defaults. Now once everything is done setting up, what you can do is you can actually hop right over to your Java file, and actually we aren't going to be using this XML file at all. So again, like I said, let me expand this a little bit. So the first thing that your app is essentially going to do is it's going to look at this class right here, and it's going to say, okay, what layout do you want to use? And right now, in this line right here, the content view pretty much tells your app, this is the layout, this is the user interface. And right now it's pointing to activity main, which is this. We know all that already. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and delete that, and I actually want to show my line numbers. So it's on line 14. So delete that. So now we have this class, but it has no interface whatsoever. The user has nothing to look at. So actually I do want to hop over in this XML file, because even though we aren't going to be using it, I do want to show you guys how we need to set up our interface. So this is our main device, so we can't really do anything with the screen. Now, alright, let me adjust myself because get ready to explain. Alright. So the very first thing we need for a user interface is a layout. Now, a layout is just your general rules telling how all of your widgets are supposed to be positioned and aligned and everything. Now, once we have a layout, we can start adding widgets to it. Alright, so first, let's go ahead and make a layout and then add some widgets to it. Now, in order to actually use these classes, we need to import something. So import Android.widget is the first one. And again, the first thing is relative layout. And there are different types of layouts. For example, we're going to be using relative. That's what we're used to working with so far. But they also have table layouts, grid layouts. Again, relative layout is kind of hard to understand at first, because whenever you're laying out your widgets, they're all going to be positioned relative to something else. So for example, the first example we'll say make a button and position it relative to the middle of your screen. So it's kind of hard to explain. It's a lot easier to visualize a table or a grid, but once you start coding, you'll see what relative really means. Pretty much position whatever you have relative to something else. So the next thing we need to do is import android.widget.button. So again, in this really simple example, I'm just going to have a layout, and then I'm going to put a button in the middle of the screen. So now that you have both of those imported, let me tighten this up so you guys can see it a bit. What we want to do is we want to stick all of the code to create the layout inside the onCreate method. So remember, that code that we deleted was right in here. And remember, whenever your activity first gets created, this is the very first thing it does. So it's always a good idea to make your layout inside this method. So hop right under this statement right here, and actually let me give myself some space. Now the first thing I want to do is just make a relative layout object. So relative layout, that's what we just imported, and I'm just going to name my layout. You can name it anything you want. I'm just going to name mine Bucky's, yeah, I think that's a good name, Bucky's layout. That'll be easy to remember. And what you do is you set this equal to new relative layout this. So now we have a layout. Essentially what we did is we created this right here, but now it has a cool name and we can do some cool stuff to it. So after this, I'm going to create a widget, and I'm just going to create a button. So button, I'll make this a red button. So red button, again, you can name yours anything you want, and new button this. So now we have a layout and a button, but that's it. We created them and they're in memory, but we didn't do anything to it. We didn't even tell it to actually display these things on the screen yet. So the first thing that we want to do is we actually want to add a widget, or pretty much add this button to the layout, because right now, like I said, these are two separate things and that's it. So in order to do that, take your layout, and anytime you want to add a widget to it, the method is called add view. Now it's called add view instead of add widget because all of these things, they inherit from the view class. That's why you see sometimes like plain text view and image view. All of the widgets are also views. So add view, just think of it like add a widget to your layout. So what widget do you want to add? Well, we only have one so far, the red button. Now after this, again, what we did is we created a layout and we created a button, and then we took that button and we added it to the view, or excuse me, well, technically we did, but we added it to the layout. Now all we have to say is, okay, now take that layout and actually use it for this activity's main user interface or main display. So anytime you want to do that, you actually call a method called setContentView, and all this is saying is, okay, what do you want this activity's main interface to be? Well, obviously we only have one thing we can stick in there, layout. So it's going to make this the main screen, and of course since we added a button to it, that button is also going to display. So now I actually probably should have started my emulator before, but I'm going to start up my emulator and run this bad boy. Alright, so there you have it. I know this is kind of hard to look at right now because the background is kind of light gray and the button is kind of like normal gray. So in the next tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to actually add some properties to this to give it some color and add some text to the button as well. And also what I did is I added some comments in the source code while my emulator was starting. And another thing that I want to mention is if you guys want any of the source code either from this tutorial or in the future tutorials, at the end of every tutorial I copy all of this and post it in my forum. So if you just want to, I don't know, like sit back and watch the tutorial, some people like coding along, some people like watching the tutorials and then just using the source code, you can do that as well. But anyways, all of this is going to be in my forum for you guys. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and in the next video we're going to be making this look a lot better. Alright. Alrighty guys, so in the last video what we did is we created the most boring interface on earth, gray with a gray button that says nothing on the button. So let's go ahead and spice this up by adding some color and actually adding some text to the button. So anytime we want to work with color, we actually need to import android.graphics.color. So now we have the ability to use color. Dun dun dun. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is actually just change the color of my layout or the background. So adding properties is actually really easy. Choose whatever you want to add a property to well, the properties are different, but I know that this one is set background color. Now, since we imported from this graphics library, what we can do is call color dot, and it gives you a bunch of default ones, but I don't know what's a good one. Green will probably stand out, although I think that this green is like lime, like very bright green, so it'll definitely stand out in the thumbnail, so I guess that's good. Now we have a green background in that gray button, so I actually want to change this to red. Since we did name it red button, it would only be fair. Now before I do that, I actually want to set the text. So of course, whenever we use the set text method, it's just going to add text to the button. And what do I want to set it to? And stupid freaking. Alright, I'll just write like click me Haas. Alright, looks good. Actually, I don't want that mark. It looks a little too much if you ask me. So now, of course, we need to set the background color of this to red. So red button, set background color, and color red. Alright, so now our background is green, and our button is now red, and it says click me Haas on it. So let's go ahead and run that and test it out. Alright, so there we have it, looking pretty good, and for some reason, this is reminding me of a Ninja Turtle right now. Raphael. Okay, so I kind of am digging this green color with the red. But anyways, the next thing I want to do is I want to show you guys how to take this button and position it in the middle of the screen right there. So right after your layout and right before your button, give yourself some space. There we go. I ate a Hot Pocket like 2 hours ago, and every time I burp it smells like a Hot Pocket, so I'm sure you guys are interested in that. But essentially what we're going to do with this button, if I could pull this back up, is we need to give it some rules, and the rules are going to say, okay, position yourself in the center of the screen both horizontally and vertically, so it's going to appear right here. So the first thing we're actually going to do is we're going to make a container to put it in, and then we're going to pretty much take that container and position it in the middle. You guys are going to see in just a second. So if you actually call this relative layout dot layout params, these layout parameters are just rules for something you want your layout to do. So since these are going to be applied to the button, I'm just going to name these like button details and set this equal to relative layout params. Now inside here, what you need to pass in is the height and the width for this container. So what we can actually do is take relative layout params, and we're going to call a property called wrap content. Now what this does is it automatically gets the height and the width of your content. So let me just finish this real quick, and then it'll be easier to see what's going on. So again, since we need to pass it in the height and the width, and actually this is giving me an error because, of course, since we're setting this equal to an object, we have to call new. Alright, so we're passing in the height and the width. So what we're going to say is just get whatever content is in your container. It's only going to be this button we're going to be sticking in there, and then get the height and the width automatically. So we don't need to pass in like a fixed value or anything. It's really easy that way. So now what we want to do is we want to say, okay, take this and position it in the center of your screen. So now that you got everything set up, you can position it wherever you want it. And in order to do that, just take that object, button details, and the rule for it, again, this is pretty much a rule of how you're going to position it, is relative layout dot center horizontal, and we're going to add another one to center vertically, and then center vertical, and then of course that's going to take it and put it in the dead center. Now in order to actually apply these rules to your button, what you need to do is whenever you add your view, right now this is just adding the button wherever it goes by default. However, if we want to give it an explicit position, we just pass in button details and it says okay, this adds the button to the layout, and this right here is saying how you want to add it. So pretty sweet. Let's run this and make sure we didn't mess anything up. Alright, looking good. So in this video, now you guys know how to add color, how to set some properties for your widgets, and also how to position them at least vertically and horizontally on the screen. So in the upcoming tutorials, I'm going to show you guys how to have a lot more control and how to create some more awesome layouts. It's going to be awesome. Again, if you want the source code for any of this, it's going to be on my forum. So yeah, I'll see you next time.